Hola, hola, buenos días, bienvenidos a esta entrevista. Soy Alexa Díaz de Sandy y hoy vamos a entrevistar a una persona que se me hace interesantísima, Anastasia Mikova, que es codirectora de la película Woman, una película que tenía como objetivo presentar cuál es el contexto de las mujeres alrededor del mundo y pues tener un poquito la definición de qué es ser mujer a través de 2000 entrevistas que hicieron. Vamos a hacer toda esta entrevista en inglés, pero quería introducir un poquito el tema en español para que pudiéramos comenzar. Entonces, voy a cambiar a inglés. So, what does being a woman mean? I believe many of us in the audience would love to get closer to having a suitable definition for this. That more than a word, in my opinion, is an experience or a reflection of an entire life of self-discovery and relationship with others. So this is why this morning we're here to discuss the worldwide project named Woman, which Anastasia Mikova, our guest here today, co-directed over the last 4 years and for which she interviewed 2,000 women in 50 different countries. Dealing with the big and small topics of women's life, the idea of the documentary was to give voice to those who are never heard in the media and reveal women's strength and resilience. In this Q&A, we'll talk about the place women have in today's world and what would be their place in tomorrow's world. So let me start our session here by introducing to you Anastasia Mikova. Anastasia Mikova is an Ukrainian-born film director and journalist whose work has always focused on social and humanistic topics. Among other things, she directed documentaries dealing with issues such as illegal immigration, organ trafficking, and surrogate mothers. In 2009, she became editor-in-chief of the series of documentaries Earth from Above for the French TV, which marked the beginning of her collaboration with the French photographer and activist Ian Bertrand. Then, acting as a first assistant director and co-author, she continued her collaboration with Mr. Ian Bertrand on the documentary film Human, released in 2015. This collaboration is ongoing as she just co-directed their new film Woman, giving voice to the women from all around the world. And the film premiered at the Venice Film Festival and was revealed in theaters this March 8th. So here is a little trailer of the movie.
Je suis une femme très gentille.
I am a creative woman.
I am a wild woman.
Me siento una mujer.
Ndi umukobwa ndi umugore w'agaciro.
Simple și complicată.
I'm a happy, strong, crazy woman.
Ako ay isang matiisin na babae.
Uma mulher atrevida.
Ben savaşçı bir kadınım.
Dynamique.
Fierce.
Seule.
Mi-ar trebui o zi întreagă ca să vă spun jumătate din calitățile pe care le am.
J'étais fier de moi. Je me regarde. J'ai dit, mais dis donc, mais je suis belle. Pourquoi est-ce que je doute?
Vi el inodoro lleno de un rojo carmín. ¡Mamá! ¡Ya me bajó!
I had my first orgasm and thought I was having a brain hemorrhage because it was just woo! I saw this little tiny heartbeat and this little bean that was in there and I was like, wow. And that was really, it's really real. There's somebody there.
On me disait pousse, je pousse. On me disait respire, je respire. J'avais le contrôle. Siitä oikeastaan lähti mun naiseksi kasvaminen. Kun mä sain sen esityksen.
Like, do hindi ko pala kahambal, hindi ko ka-express kay syempre, do ko sa baga ang ginhambal nanda nga love at first sight lahat.
Nibus niyaon.
Pues ya me hace sentirme bonita.
My husband told me, well, look at yourself in the mirror. And then you'll know why I'm not attracted to you anymore.
Sen benden ne istiyorsun kadınım değil. Senin fazlalığın gibi bana diyebilir misin ki benim senden fazlalığım budur.
It didn't take me long to realize that I would die in this relationship. If I didn't leave, I would die.
The bravest thing I've done was to stand
in front of an audience and say, I'm a survivor of sexual violence and human trafficking.
Ay na-empower din ako nga babae. Ito siyempre, kung hindi ko pag-i-voice out, kag pakita ang ako niya kapasidad.
Women have opened their eyes. The women will fight for their rights.
Io passioneggiando prima che vuoi, sì. Ma io sto da che non falli mi doppiamento, ai muschi, tasciai.
So, without further ado, here it is Anastasia Mikova. Hello, Anastasia, how are you?
Hey, happy to see you.
Thank you so much for being with us from Paris. We're very, very excited to have you today. So, I wanted to start this Q&A by getting to know a little bit more about you. So, who is Anastasia?
So, as you were saying in your presentation, first of all, I'm a journalist. Before being a director, I'm a journalist. I'm an investigative journalist, and I have been doing this job maybe for more than 15 years. And I have always been interested in social and humanistic topics. It's something I really always wanted to dig and really always wanted to understand. So I started by making films on such difficult topics as illegal immigration, as organ trafficking, things like that. And then little by little, I got to really kind of wanting to explore more the human soul and trying to understand beyond the topic, beyond the like that or that situation, to understand what do we have inside that make us human, and what do we all share around the world, and what are the things that maybe tear us apart. And so in this job, I was lucky to meet another incredible director, Yann Bertrand, who around 8 years ago suggested that we make a big documentary project which is called Human. And the whole idea of this project was exactly that, was trying to understand human beings around the world better. And so we traveled all around the world, meeting very different people and talking with them about these big topics we all share. So about war, about peace, about meaning of life, about love, about happiness, etc. And so all of these different people shared their stories, and then we made a film out of it, and it's called Human, and it was released almost 5 years ago. And this film inspired us to make a different project, but in continuation, let's say, of our work, really focused on women, because we really felt that the moment has arrived for women to be in the center and to be heard. And so we thought, okay, women need a window now. They're ready to be heard. Let's create that window for them. And this is how Woman Project started. And so we started 4 years ago, and we finally finished this year.
Wow, that is amazing. It's really interesting to see and the dynamics of interviewing women, right? Because I imagine it was very particular. While you were filming Human, I remember I saw an interview that something made you think about the differences that came out of interviewing women. So how was the experience of interviewing women? How did it feel, or how did you approach this dynamics of the movie? Because I think it's very, very particular, and we haven't seen anything like it.
So it's interesting because when we worked on Human, we would come to a country, and almost everywhere all around the world, men would be quite proud to talk in front of the camera and would easily come to us and tell us, oh, what are you doing? Are you filming? Oh, you know who I am? I want to share my story and everything. Whereas women generally would be much more suspicious and would ask us a lot of questions like, why are you doing this? What is it for? Why do you want me to ask, to answer that or that particular topic? But once they kind of understood the project and once they were in front of the camera, they accepted this. It was incredible. Something really amazing happened. It was as if many of these women have waited for this moment their whole life, and as if all of the things they have kept inside for so many years, and some of them all of their life, could finally be released and could finally be shared with the rest of the world. And so this was a new situation because, as I said, I have been doing this for more than 15 years. And 15 years ago, in some countries, it was impossible to find a woman ready to talk in front of the camera, and share her personal story. And here we were 5 years ago, and women would come to us and wanted to share their story. And so when we finished Human, we discussed it with Jan, and I said, I think the moment has arrived. Women are ready. Something is going on. Something is in the air. So they just, need a window. Let's think about what kind of project we could do. And we actually explored a lot of stuff that has been done about women. And there are more or less two types of films that have been done, whether portraits of one specific woman through the history or modern to tell her story, or sometimes experts about women's rights or situations, blah, blah, blah. But there have never been done a movie with just women, simple women from everyday life, from all around the world, like a very global project, where they would just share their story and all of the big and small topics of their lives. And so since it has never been done, and I mean, there are a lot of films that have been done, but not this one, we thought, okay, let's do it. And this is how we started.
That's really quite special. And how did you come about the process of interviewing women? Did you have a script, or did it just, because it looks from the trailer that it was just the women there sharing their stories and just letting it just, as you said, right, making it a window to tell their stories and just try to develop it. But did you have a particular objective with each interview, or it just came out like magic?
So before launching the shootings, we have discussed it and we have worked on the preparation for almost a year. So even though it looks like everything was spontaneous, when you make a global project like that, you really need to kind of to know where you're going, because also you have to understand that only women did the interviews. I didn't do the 2,000 interviews myself, because if not, it would have taken us 10 years. So I had an amazing team of 5 journalists who worked with me for the 2 years of shooting. Each of them spoke a different language. One was from Colombia, so she spoke Spanish. One spoke Arabic, one spoke Russian, etc. And so together, we were this interviewing team, and Jan didn't do any of the interviews because, well, given the intimacy and the private topics we were discussing in the film, I think it would have been impossible for a woman to share it with a man. And so, however, in advance, as directors, together with Jan, we had to define what did we want to talk about in a film which is called Woman. What are the topics that we thought would be, important? And so the whole idea for us was to kind of have a mix between very, very universal topics where all of the women would have something to share. And so these were topics like, growing up in a woman's body, having your first periods, talking about motherhood or deciding not to have children, talking about emancipation, work, and the relationship we have with money, talking about love and relationship with men, talking about violence, talking about discriminations, big and small, talking about the relationship we have with our bodies, sexuality, women's pleasure, We don't need a specific story to share something about that. Every woman can share something about those topics. So this was parts of the film, and the other part were more of specific like topics we as directors wanted to highlight in the film. And one of those topics, for example, was rape as weapon of war. And for this topic, we have been to DRC, for example, Congo, and we have also interviewed some Yazidi women who have been, in this whole Syria situation and have been sold to ISIS. And the whole idea for us was to say, how is it even possible that in 2020, there are still women who are sold for a package of cigarettes? How can it be accepted by the world until today? And so the kind of the mix in the film was about all of these universal topics, about all of the women, and more specific topics. And so in every country where we went, whether we searched for all kinds of women, and it was very open, and the whole idea was to have as diverse, interviews as possible. And sometimes, on the contrary, we would go to a specific place because we knew that there was that or that situation that we wanted to highlight in the film. But in all of these cases, it needed months and months of preparation. It wasn't just like that. Because, given the intimacy that we have in these interviews, you can't just come to a place and after 5 minutes or 10 minutes of conversation, ask a woman to share, her first orgasm or the rape she has been through. It really takes time, and you need to create that trust, So this is why in all of the countries, we had what we call fixers. And these were local journalists who worked for months and months in advance.
Mm-hmm. Wow. And now that you mentioned that, it will be pretty interesting to talk about a little bit of how was the process, or who did you approach to make this interview happen? Like, I have an understanding that you work with a lot of NGOs worldwide.
Yes.
Mm-hmm. So
so we had
proceed. Sorry.
So yes, we had local fixers, as I said, in every country. So only women. So a lot of women worked on this film, and so in each context, the fixer would use her own context, but also a lot of the local NGOs to find the women. And it was funny because when we started to prepare each shooting, the first thing we needed for the fixer to understand was what we were searching for. And so it's not like a classic casting. So they would start by asking, okay, so what kind of women do you want? What age? More or less young or old? Every. Okay, so what kind of social category? More rich, more wealthy, or more simple? All of it. Okay, so more city or more maybe somewhere villages and everything? No, both. And so at a certain point, a fixer would look at us and say, what do you want, And so the whole idea for us was to make them understand that it wasn't about that or that criteria. It was more about finding the women who were ready to share their story in front of the camera, because not everybody is able to do that. And even more, who were ready to assume all of what they would say after that. Because it's one thing that to talk like that, in person with just one journalist, and it's a different thing when millions of people around the world will see it. So this is why we also worked a lot with local NGOs, because on the most difficult topics, for example, as far as violence, is concerned, it was very important for us not to expose these women to any consequences. And so some of the women wanted to talk and wanted to kind of share their story, but the NGO would say, yeah, but she's too angry and she's not realizing, what's going on, and she's not understanding what it may mean for her. And so together they would tell us okay, maybe that woman, she's ready because she has already processed the story. She's already out of that, relationship, and she's already at the stage where she can assume all of it afterwards. And so it was very important for us to work together with the NGOs so that all of the women who are in the film will be proud to be in this film, and, will be celebrated and will feel celebrated, and will not feel okay, they came here, they took my story from me, and then they just disappeared, and I'm now completely lost, and I don't know why I did it and everything. So this is why the work with the NGOs to create the trust I was talking about, to create that relationship with each of that woman was very important, of course.
Definitely. Wow. Very, very intricate work and very personalized, right? How did you manage to well, when it comes to editing the movie, how did you manage to actually choose from those stories if you made such deep connections and you were so involved into these women's stories? Because I can imagine that the process of interviewing them was very, as you said, intimate, but also deep and probably personal, right? So when it came down to editing a movie for, I don't know, like 2 hours, maybe it lasts, I'm not sure. How did you choose from all the material that you created? Because I believe like almost you had like the gold of the world in your hands, right?
Well, to be honest, it was the most frustrating part because the most difficult wasn't to prepare all of those shootings, wasn't to do all of those interviews. There were difficult moments. There were a lot of emotions, a lot of things, you know, like we shared. But the most difficult was once we had all of these stories and all of them deserved to be in the film. All of them deserved to be heard. And then we had to make the choice. And how do you make a choice when all of these women have something interesting to share? And how do you go from 2,000 hours of interview to 2 hours of film? And so I remember we had two amazing editors, also two women who worked with us. And I remember we did the first version of the film with them, and it was around 7 or 8 hours. And with Jan, we were really happy because we thought that in those 8 hours, there were already all the stories we wanted to share. Everything was there. But then, you know, you can't release an 8-hour film in cinemas, unfortunately. And our distributors, they were not that happy. So, we did this version maybe after 2 months of editing. And then it took us more than 10 months to come up with, starting from those 8 hours to go to 2 hours and to have the finished version of the film. And actually, it was a never-ending process. We would, you know, cut some stuff, do that editing, and then a week later, we would watch it again and say, oh, did you cut that woman? Oh, no, I loved her. Okay, let's put her back. And then, oh, okay. Oh, and then the journalist would come and say, oh, but there was another one. She was also amazing. Okay, let's put her. Oh, then, but it changes a little bit of perspective. Oh, maybe we should try this, you know? And it was like really never ending. And so happily enough, we were taking to premiere at the Venice Film Festival. And we were really, really proud to be, you know, to present the film to the world for the very first time at the one of the best festivals in the world. And so we had a kind of date for which we had to finish the editing. If not, you know, we would lose the premiere. And so it's happily enough we had it, because if not, I'm afraid we would still be editing the film. But I'm happy because we, with all of the material we got, we were able to make also a book, which is almost 300 pages, with a lot of testimonies that we couldn't use in the film, with also some articles, with also some numbers that gives a lot of, you know, complementary information. And we also are working now on an exhibition that will travel all around the world starting, well, if everything is fine, starting from next year. And so all of these stories will exist in a kind of our galaxy. So even though all of the women are not in the film, they will exist somewhere. And we also have a Facebook, which is Woman the Film, and we have an Instagram, which is Woman the Movie. And we also post a lot of the stories. We have live sessions with some of these women. And so we make all of them exist in a way in the Woman Project, because all of them are unique and deserve it.
Mm-hmm. Wow, that is really like the woman family. I love it.
In a way.
And speaking about the editing process, how is working with Yann Arthus Bertrand? It seems to me very interesting to know that this is a film about women, but two people, a woman and a man, directed and co-directed this film. How was it for Ian even? Because I imagine that some of the topics for women, for us, is natural to talk about them, but as a director, how could you? How was it? Like, probably was it shocking, or what was the dynamic between you guys?
So first of all, I have to say that it has been like almost 12 years that we are working with Jan now. So it's not even a professional relation anymore. It's more of like a family kind of stuff. You know, we're really close, and I know him so well. I know all of his family. He knows mine, so it helps a lot. So even when we fight, and we fight sometimes very hard, we know that we have this human relationship, which is so more, you know, so much more important. And then so we can meet the next day and discuss it again, and it doesn't change anything in our relationship. But it's funny because when we started this film, Jan really had an idea, like for him, this film should really focus on all the injustices women face all around the world, because he's also an activist. And so he wanted to show like all the injustices, all the discriminations, etc., etc. And when I listened to him, it was more like a film about all the atrocities of being a woman. And for me, I was like, yeah, if we call this film Woman, it can't be just about that. If we want to go and dig into woman's soul, we have to understand what it is to be a woman. And so we have to go very personal. We also have to go very intimate. Obviously, it's important to talk about injustices and discriminations, but it's also important to talk about periods, for example. And I remember the first time I told him that, he looked at me like, periods? What really is important about periods, you know? And it's so obvious to me that I decided even not to explain to him. I just said, you know, I will make some interviews, and you will listen to them, and then we will discuss it again. And actually, once you have listened to it, you have never asked the question again. And I think actually what's really interesting and good about this film is that the fact that we did it together, because there was a man's point of view and a woman's point of view. And also we are from two different generations. He's a 74-year-old man, even though he's very open-minded, he traveled all the world, he's very, you know, sensitive. But however, he's a man of his generation. And I'm a woman of 37 years old, and also from foreign origin, etc. So we have two different kind of lives and two different ways to see it live. And I think that the way we kind of joined our two stories together and our two visions together made that this film doesn't only talk with women or only with men, but that it aims to talk with everyone. And for me, it was important as a woman, sometimes when I would deal with the topic and I saw that Jan didn't understand that or that situation, it didn't touch him the way it touched me. I always thought, okay, why? Why doesn't it touch a man? How can we approach the subject so it will touch a man? And sometimes on the contrary, for him, he would kind of look at me and see stuff and realize how important it was for a woman. And maybe so on some topics he would never think to deal about in the film, he actually kind of let it go and accepted because he saw the importance of these topics for me. And so I think our two visions together made this film what it is today.
I find it very, very interesting and complementary. So it's really... It's the richness of the movie or the project as you present it is amazing, and I think it's never been done. So thank you again for doing it. We can't wait to see it here in Mexico. How about we switch a little bit to some of the questions that the people and the audience have right now live. One of the questions that I had already prepared, but also comes with Educando con el Corazón, which is someone that's watching us right now. He asks, in your experience, what is the problematic that women have to face all around the world? Like, what will be the particular thing that you would see that it's kind of the same around the world about being a woman?
Guess. Alexa, try to guess. What do you think it is?
Wow. Being weaker? Being sentimental? I'm not sure. Not being equal to men? I don't know.
It's very, very sad. But my realization during this film, and I really didn't think that it was to that point. The one thing all of the women share all around the world is the degree of violence women have to face everywhere. And it made me sad, it made me frustrated, it made me furious. Because if I had to proportionally show in the film all of the stories about violence I have heard around the world, 70% of the film would be about violence. But we decided not to do that because, happily enough, a woman's life is not only about that. And there's so many other things and so many beautiful and joyful things also in our lives. But however, this for me was like a very important realization. The degree of the violence women face all around the world is beyond what you can imagine. And by the way, the situation we are going through right now with this coronavirus crisis, it shows us so well this problem, because in all of the countries where the self-isolation started, there was a huge rise in domestic violence. But at the same time, it started from China, and we saw that, the numbers rose like in just 1 or 2 weeks in a completely, crazy way. Then it happened in Italy. It was the same, but none of the countries tried to do something to act. All of them just reacted once it was already there, and women would be abused, would die, and etc. And I think in Latin countries it's particularly true, because this, I think, was unfortunately one of the regions where the degree of violence women face is among the highest. And so for me, this realization was very important, because when we sometimes say in the media right now, oh my God, we talk too much about women's violence and, the domestic violence is all over the media, blah, blah, blah. When I saw the degree and the, let's say, the dimension of violence women have to face, I would say we clearly don't talk about it enough.
I think it's pretty interesting that you're saying that, because we do not talk about it enough, because it seems like a taboo, because it seems like it's too violent, right? It's we cannot dedicate some time to think about the suffering of other women that can also relate to our own experiences, because we might be experiencing different degrees of violence that could potentially escalate to something horrific. But I think, or at least in my perspective, I think we just diminish it a little bit because it's too much to bear, so we don't do it, or we just don't want to put attention enough for it, because to actually make the changes needed to eradicate violence against women, we would need to change the entire dynamics of society and how we relate to ourselves. How do we relate with men, with our children, with our friends, with the government? And I don't want to say this because I'm not a pessimistic, but I'm not even sure that we're ready for a change like that. Even though we need it right now urgently, I'm not sure that everyone is open to the idea of having to change from the deep core to really manifest a different world or a different situation for women, right? So about
that's exactly what needs to be done. And that's the core of the problem. One of the essence of the problem we have facing discrimination, facing inequality. It's also in the violence women have to face, because it's something, when you see the dimension of it all around the world, and when you see how, as you say, we diminish that problem, and how almost everywhere people just try to cover up, you know that it means that the society is not ready, but it has to be ready, because what I saw in the field, what I saw interviewing these women, that women are not ready to wait for another generation for the things to change. And many of the women were ready to expose themselves today because they don't want their daughters to reproduce what they have been reproducing from their mothers, from their grandmothers. They want to see the change. More and more women are ready to expose themselves to see the change. And we are half of the population of the world. So I believe, and I'm optimistic, contrary to you, that since we are half of the population, there would be a certain degree where, there would be too many women who are ready to act. And so the society will be forced to follow. It will take time, but I'm sure it will come.
Yes, let's make it happen. And a follow-up question about this topic specifically from the audience comes, someone asks, how does the movie help shorten the gap of gender inequality? what do you think is the role of the movie towards that specific problematic?
So for me, it's anyway. For me, art is one of the very important ways to change the world. Because I mean, art is what makes us reflect. It's what opens our horizon. It's what creates a different thoughts in our heads. And some people, just by watching a film, may get a different perspective on stuff. And you know what happened when we released the film, and we were lucky to be taken at many, many festivals all around the world after we did the premiere at Venice Film Festival. And almost everywhere, couples would come to me and tell me, you know, that your film is the best therapy for a couple. Because after we watched the film, there would be a man coming to me saying, you know what, now I want to go home and excuse myself and ask forgiveness to my girlfriend, to my wife, etc., for all of the moments when she complains about something, when she asks them, and I would not listen. I would like diminish it and say, oh, it's nothing, you know, etc. Now, when I heard all of these women all around the world, I understand that it wasn't just about her, that it's really something important. And it opened my eyes. And a lot of men told me that this film opened their eyes on many, many topics. And I think that a lot of the problems we have in the world, but not only about gender equality in general, it's because of the lack of understanding the topics, and it's because of the lack of communication. Because quite often when we have a problem, we instead of facing it, we always try to avoid it. We always prefer not to go frontal because, you know, it's not that easy. And so many people lack communication. And all of our films, and especially women, is about communicating, about trying to understand the other one better, and especially about relationship between men and women. And I think there are a lot of things that happen in our heads that men just don't understand. And this film is not the key, but maybe one of the keys in better understanding. And in that way, I think it can play a role in, let's say, changing the patterns in families. And that's where it starts, you know. And there is a small story I would like to share, but just one example. But I mean, one example is already enough. So it's a story that happened in Madagascar. And we came to a small village, very traditional and everything. And, you know, in those communities where, you know, when you're not happy with your wife, you just beat her up, you know, you're not happy, you just beat her. And so when we came to that family, the husband, he didn't even let the woman talk first. He wanted to talk for her. And we were there to respect the traditions. We didn't want to hurt anyone, etc. So we discussed with him first, and she was serving the tea during that time. And then little by little, we told him, but you know, we're here for your wife. We would like to talk with her. Is it okay? Since we have respected him, we had listened to him, he was okay. And so little by little, he accepted. And we did the interview. And she shared a lot of beautiful things. And our fixer called us later, a week later, something like that, and said, you know what happened? After you left the village, he had never beaten her again. And to be honest, I first thought, okay, it's just the effect after the interview, you know, it will all come back to as it was before. But actually what happened is that for the first time, he looked at his wife differently, and he saw value in her, because he thought, oh my God, there are people from another, you know, end of the world coming to interview my wife. So there must be something valuable in her. And so it changed the way he looked at her. And actually we took some news just before the release of the film. So more than a year later, and the fixer told us that he never lifted a hand at her again. And I mean, it's just one example, of course, but it's already an incredible example, because if it can change something in the head of that man, so it can happen in heads of many, many other men.
That is amazing. Wow. That's definitely, as you said, I'm a firm believer that art is an amazing way to change people's realities and how people think about the world, because it expands ourselves, right? And talking in a more positive note, what would you say in your experience, because this is also a question repeated by the audience, what would you say in your experience unites women around the world? Like, what would be the thing that you would say, oh yeah, this is recurrent in every woman, and it also in a way adds to the happiness or the definition of the happiness of women around the world?
I wouldn't say that it's something that relates clearly to one topic. I would say more that what I discovered with this film, there is this term of sorority that we often and more often use now, to speak about women and the link we have between women. To be honest, I haven't really understood what it means until I started working on this project. I liked the term, I thought it was interesting, but I didn't really understand, like me, what exactly it is. And when I started to work on women, it's not only I understood it, I physically felt it. And I would be on another end of the world in a completely different country where these women's lives would have nothing to do with mine. And in a few seconds, just like that, I would feel completely connected with these women. And it was as if there was an invisible link between all of us. And the mirror effect that there was just so incredible. All of these women whose lives had nothing to do with mine, I would recognize myself in them. I would cry with them. I would laugh with them. I would share so much. And before even having the translation in many languages, I couldn't even understand. I would feel their emotions and I would feel connected. And all of the journalists who worked on the film told me exactly that. And almost all the women who watched the film tell me that afterwards, that watching this film, they realize the bond there is between us. And I think quite often we don't realize that and we don't use that. Because as women, right from the childhood, very often we are taught to kind of see other women as rivals. If she's more beautiful than you, if she's more talented than you, are there space for two? You should always fight for yourself. Women are not often like linked together in groups like men do, like all together, like in that fraternity thing, I don't know. And by working on this project, I really realized that it wasn't about one specific topic, but it was more of that invisible bond that was there. And that really made me kind of proud to be a woman. And I thought, wow, it's great. There is something there that unites us, all of us, and that we kind of don't see and we don't want to accept. We should accept it. We should embrace it. We should be proud of it. And I hope that by watching this film, all of the women of this world will feel celebrated and will feel proud to be a woman. That's my wish.
That is really, really amazing. And I think it's exactly what you say. Like, most of us women start or live our lives thinking that there's not enough for all of us, that you have to earn your place, whether it's in the film industry or I don't know, in journalism, or in whatever subject, right? Like, you have to fight always to find your place and to make it your own. And once you're there, you don't want to let it go. So if other women come, maybe in situations you don't help them, or you just try to push them away because they're going to take away what you earned, right? The life's work that you've dedicated to earn the place that you have. So a follow-up on this topic would be also, what would you recommend, or for you and your experience, what would be the first steps that we can take to start experiencing this sorority? Because I think, I don't know if, of course, around the world, but especially in Latin countries, there's this like unsaid competition, constant competition, whether it's to get the beautiful man or the faithful one or the rich one, or you're young, you're beautiful, you said it, right? Like, there's always a topic to compete for. And it's never said because we're all like, oh yeah, my sister, my friend, and we're very kind and we're very like into looks and polite and what people might say, so there's always like a facade. But how would you say, or what would you say would be the first steps to actually start feeling the sorority and start tearing these walls down, so that we as women can just feel that, be proud of who we are, and just embrace ourselves and help ourselves, right? As a community.
I think, but it's normal actually that it happens, because we have been taught this for so many generations. We have been taught that there is no place for all the women because women are inferior. So there are just some places for few. So there are only few that can achieve this or that. And when you have been taught it all of your life, obviously that's what you transmit to your children, and that's what your children will say to their daughters, blah blah blah. And quite often women themselves would teach their daughters stuff they have been taught, and reproduce some of the patterns. And I think the first step is already to start with you and to realize, am I doing something because I want it, or am I doing it because I was taught and I have never doubted or questioned what I was taught? And actually, if I was taught that or that stuff, is it something I really want to do? Does it make me happy? Does it make me achieve that or that stuff in my life that I'm really wishing for? Or am I just doing something without even being conscious about it? And when you start thinking about that, already you realize how many things we do without even being conscious that we're doing it, and how much we can judge others without even being able to understand that we're judging. And I think that just to stop and to kind of already focus on yourself, not think about what others do, not think about like how other women act, but just think about yourself and focus on that, is already a great start, because then it makes you realize like what you actually want from life, and actually to look at others a little bit differently. And I'm sure that a lot of women, when they open that door, they may realize that, others are not that different and are not enemies. And this is how we break the pattern, because I think there is a way to break the pattern. We don't have to reproduce stuff, forever. We can decide to break it. But for that, you need to kind of stop and think about it first, without just, because in our lives, most of the time, we don't have time to stop. It's funny what's happening right now. I think all around the world, we are in this completely crazy situation. But at the same time, it's one of those very rare moments where we can stop and reflect on who we are and what we really want from life, even though it's very difficult moment, even though there are uncertainties. But for us as human beings, it's a moment to stop. And we are very rarely having those moments in our lives. So I think that maybe we should use it to stop and start, focusing on ourselves.
Definitely. I think it's necessary if we want to just move forward with our lives and create the world that we deserve as a community, I think. So I would like to end this Q&A by asking you finally the question of the hour. It has come up also with the live audience. So if in your experience, or if you could give a definition, what does being a woman mean?
Oh my God, we need another 24 hours to answer that question. I think there isn't like one single answer. There are millions of answers to this question, because all of the women are unique. All of them have something to share with the world, and all of them have differences and have their, have things that make them women that are not similar. And sometimes it's really it's even beyond what we can express with words. It's just a feeling, it's just a sensation or something like that. But what I can say is that what I learned from this film, like for me, maybe one of the biggest lessons this film taught me, is the resilience women have all around the world and the strength women have. And these are not really like just words. This is something that made me kind of, wow. I knew that women were strong, but I didn't know how strong and how resilient women were. And there is a woman who told me in an interview that, it's as if, since we have so many stages in our lives, much more than men, physically, I mean, when we have our bodies changing, when we have our period, when we have our, when we give birth, and just that already. And then also because of all the discrimination, all the difficulties women are facing in a lot of countries, until today, it's as if it was in our DNA. The life, was preparing us for all of this, and so made us resilient and strong. And even though physically some women are weaker, here they're so strong. And what really maybe struck me in the interviews, it's like the strongest women I met, the most resilient women I met, were the ones who have been through the most difficult stuff and through the most horrific experiences. And it was as if they used all of this experience to build themselves and to say, okay, I would not like to be a victim. I don't want to be seen as a victim my whole life. I will take all of this experience and I will build a new me. And sometimes it was beyond understanding, because these women would share stories, with me that I would just not bear to listen because it was too hard to hear that. And they would be there strong and standing. And so I hope that by watching this film, other women all around the world will realize how strong we are and will not be afraid to go and dare.
Thank you so much, Anastasia, for this message. I think we are living in times where women, or people in general, but I guess in this case, women need to be celebrated, need to remind themselves of why they're here, what's the purpose of their lives, what unites us, what makes us better and greater and deserving of a happy and fulfilled life, right? So thank you so much for for all your dedication, for your passion, because we can really, really see through this, even though if it's through a screen, that you're very passionate about this topic and in general about human beings and our capacity to be better, stronger, and more loving and kinder to everyone else, right? So thank you so much for your time. Yeah. Thank you so much for your time. I would like for you to just tell us where we can find information about the film and about the book you just mentioned.
What do you want me to say? I'm sorry.
Where can we find the film or information about the film, like the social media or the book?
Yes. So the film, the release of the film has been suspended in most of the countries where it will be screened in cinemas. So we are waiting for, to know how the situation evolves, but the film will be released, whether it will be in cinemas or for VOD, video on demand, or on platforms, etc. It will be available all around the world. And so we are putting all the information on our social media, and we will let people know there. So on Facebook, we are Woman Le Film, like in French, Le Film. And on Instagram, it's woman_the movie. And you have a lot of stuff about different women from all around the world, about, making of the film, how we worked, etc., and all the information about the release. And the book, I will show it to you, wait, just to finish, it's this. It has already been translated into English and German, and it is now translated into Spanish. So I hope it will be released in Mexico also soon. Anyway, as soon as we get this information, we will post it on our social media.
Thank you so much, Anastasia. Again, this has been amazing, very, very interesting, and very informational for us, but it's also been a very nice process to just say, yes, we're getting there. We're getting there to get to know what woman can do, what we can become, and if we come together, how we can really transform this world. So thank you so much. Yeah. I would like to thank the audience also that has been with us here tonight. And I'm going to switch a little bit to Spanish so that I can give thanks to everybody. Muchísimas gracias por haber participado con nosotros. No se pierdan la siguiente conferencia, que se trata de ciudades y género, con Gabriela de la Torre Ríos. Muchísimas gracias. Pueden encontrar toda la información entonces en el Facebook de Woman, o también sigan nuestras redes sociales en Talent Woman. Nos vemos en un ratito. Gracias.